From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
Back at it for another Wildcast podcast. I'm Justin Spears, joined alongside Michael Lev and sports editor of the Star, Brett Fera. We're going to be talking nothing but Arizona versus Mississippi State on Saturday in Starkville. And then later on in the podcast, we'll do everyone's favorite weekly segment, Pac-12 Pick'ems. So guys, big game on Saturday. We'll run through what we took away from Saturday and look ahead to this game against the Bulldogs in Starkville. It's the first time Arizona's going to SEC country in 17 years. Last time the Wildcats went down south was when they took on LSU in 2006. Poor Willie Tuitama getting absolutely thrashed around by the Tigers D-line. But that was LSU when the Tigers were really in their heyday. This is a middle-tier SEC opponent that is a little bit different this year under their new leadership, Zach Arnett, who I keep wanting to call Will Arnett. But they're a little bit different than Mike Leach and the Pirates. And Lev, you actually wrote about this in your Cat Stats. When Arizona faces Mississippi State on Saturday, what can the Wildcats expect? What can Arizona fans expect when they see this team play against Arizona?
Yeah, they can expect to see what people would traditionally define as a balanced offense, right? Mississippi State ran the ball more than it passed the ball in its first game. That never happened a single time under Mike Leach, who, of course, was one of the pioneers of the air raid offense. And Mike Leach, he would pass the ball around 70% of the time over the course of his career. There were no huge secrets. He had this kind of play sheet that looked like a note card over there, unlike a lot of what we see nowadays with the giant laminated Denny's menu, and guys can pretty much hide, obscure their entire head behind it. You knew what you were going to get when you faced a Mike Leach team, and it worked most of the time. I mean, he had great success at places where coaches don't have great success, and it's because of that system. Well, they have a new offensive coordinator now, and Kevin Barbay, and a different system altogether. And they rushed for nearly 300 yards in their opener, and I guarantee you they are going to test Arizona's, bigger, supposedly better defensive front by trying to play smash mouth SEC football against them.
The more I think about this game, guys, are we maybe overplaying the fact that Mississippi State runs a lot more than we saw last year against the Wildcats? Because you look at their opponent last week against Southeast Louisiana, you expect them to go out and run all over them and kind of impose their will and run for almost 300 yards. Keep it very basic, very vanilla. We saw a little bit out of that from Arizona. We didn't see a lot of flash. No passes were thrown to tight ends. I mean, some of the top pass catchers were running backs. So I think maybe both teams kept it very vanilla, kept it very basic for this game. Now, I do think we're going to see Mississippi State run a lot more than we saw last year. But, I mean, Will Rogers is a really good quarterback. And I think that maybe the Bulldogs have something in store where they can kind of go back to last year's game plan and do the death by 1,000 paper cuts but throw the ball a lot.
Well, Will Rogers, I think after that game, we were all sort of like, can he throw the ball more than 15 yards down the field? Because it just didn't happen that often. He didn't need to. I mean, he was taking that shotgun snap, getting the ball out of his hands. He had 30 passes thrown in between 0 and 9 yards down the field. 30, and connected on most of them. It was super efficient. There weren't a ton of big plays by the Bulldogs, but I think as that game went on, you could just sort of tell that there was a gap in talent between the two schools. You described Mississippi State earlier as a mid-level SEC school. So the question is a mid-level SEC school still significantly better than a mid-level Pac-12 school? Based on the first week of results, I think it's a legit question because the Pac-12 is undefeated. The SEC struggled to a certain degree, at least in the games against other Power 5 opponents. So, I think different-looking Mississippi State offense, but the same caliber of athletes, and that's really kind of what it boils down to.
All right, looking at what's different about Arizona on both sides of the ball since the last time these two teams played against each other in the second game of the season. It was kind of a learning. It was a big lesson for Jayden de Laura, I think, in this game because you saw in his first game at Arizona sets the tone at San Diego State. Him and Jacob Cowing are very productive, but you wondered, okay, when is it going to hit for Jayden de Laura? When are we going to start to see maybe some of his flaws be exposed? And against the Bulldogs last year, Jayden didn't run at all. I mean, he had 2 rushing attempts, but I think those rushing attempts might have been sacks, if I'm not mistaken, for minus 25 yards. There were plenty of opportunities last year where Jayden de Laura could have ran the ball, could have picked up anywhere from 8 to 14 yards, keep the drives alive, get the offense into a rhythm, but instead they were very one-dimensional with Jayden de Laura just kind of sitting in the pocket. And give credit to Arnett, he was getting linebackers, he was blitzing safeties, he was bringing the pressure a lot and making Jayden de Laura really start to think. And he didn't use his legs on the fly. Instead, he wanted to make these plays with his arms, and he couldn't do that. But after the game, Jedd Fisch said, these critical errors, this is something that we need to address. I'm going to talk to Jayden about it. And then what did Jayden de Laura do the following week? He set a career high in rushing yards. Then periodically, all throughout the season, we started to see him use his legs more. And now that he's what they call bigger, stronger, faster, we're seeing a more polished version of Jayden de Laura. And he bolted for a 53-yard run down the sideline against NAU. And again, I get it. It's NAU. But these are the kind of plays that we didn't see Jayden de Laura make last season. And this is a completely different quarterback that the Bulldogs are getting this time around.
It is, but I think if we break down NAU further, it's not that different of a quarterback. I mean, it is. We know it is because we see him. He's bigger. We can tell he's faster, especially from that run. But he still technically only had 3 carries, one of which was a sack against NAU. So one of them being that 53-yarder. So he didn't do this a lot. He did fumble the ball. He did throw a pick, in a weird kind of trafficky situation. So I don't know if we saw as much out of Jayden de Laura as we thought we would in a week like that, but it didn't matter. I think to me he did what he needed to do, which oddly is more than he did in certain cases last year. He didn't overly try to put up 45 points and 400 yards. He did exactly what he needed to do, which was keep the offense moving, get him up early, and let the defense kind of shine and show its thing.
Yeah. Over the years on this podcast, Justin and I often have kind of talked about the quarterback as a point guard and made some comparisons to NBA players. I think when you watch Jayden de Laura, I mean, the guy that you think of maybe is Russell Westbrook, right? And you would sort of like him to play more like Chris Paul. He has great weapons around him. Just distribute the ball, get it out of your hands, take advantage of those guys. And he did that a lot against NAU. He dumped the ball off to running backs, and they got a ton of yards after the catch. But then there's always those few moments, those handful of plays during the course of the game. And Russell Westbrook hasn't really ever changed, has he, Justin? You're a basketball expert.
Nope.
Your nature is kind of what your nature is. And Jayden de Laura is hyper competitive. He wants to make a play every single time that he can. That play at the end of the first quarter, remember that one, Justin, where he's kind of scrambling around to the left and then he threw back over the middle? Throw the ball out of bounds.
Yeah.
Just chuck it out of bounds. Move on to the next down. I remember this is something that Jedd keeps close track of, and I think it's really smart, is like, what down are you committing these turnovers on? Like, if you're if it's 3rd and 15 and you take a chance throwing down the field, that's acceptable. If it's 1st and 10...
Weren't they both 1st and 10?
And I believe they were.
NAU?
Yeah, I believe they were. And against Cal, I think that was an issue too last year, where there were some 1st and 10 turnovers. Like, the term game manager gets thrown around as if it's a negative thing. I mean, I think it's one of the most important traits that you can have as a quarterback is managing the game, knowing when to say when. And when it's 1st and 10, you don't need to do anything crazy, unless the clock's running out. And in those situations, that's not what was happening. Throw the ball out of bounds, slide down, take a less yards on a scramble. It's okay. There are several more downs to go on the drive.
And I think that Jayden DeLaura is gotten to a point now where not only is he running the ball better, and Jacob Cowling even kind of said it. When I asked him like, "Hey, is Jayden DeLaura a much better runner?" and he said, "No, I mean he's trained to really operate in the pocket, but he picks and chooses his opportunities when to run." And I think being smart with it, I think this is going to be key for Jayden DeLaura. But also, I find it very interesting too, Lev, when we talk about Jayden DeLaura's progress as a quarterback in 1 year under the system. Now they're getting to a point where they're improvising. They're spending periods in practice where they're allowing Jayden and Jed and the receivers to kind of have some fun with it and drawing up plays for themselves. That's something that they watched on Netflix with quarterback Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. They have that relationship to where they can work on certain plays together and make certain tweaks, which is very interesting to me because a year ago Jayden would be the first one to tell you, like, I couldn't recite the plays back to Jed Fish. Not only has he mastered the offense, but now he's gotten to a point where they're able to work on a few things. That wasn't the case last year.
Yeah, trust is huge.
Yeah.
Right? You have to have trust between the coach and the quarterback. You have to have trust between the quarterback and the receivers. That play that you're, the improvisation or whatever that you're referencing came to fruition in the game. They had this slot fade play that resulted in a touchdown for Jacob Cowling. They went with the exact same look when they were at about the same part of the field down at the other end. And, they decided, I don't know if it was during practice or maybe on the sideline, like, hey, if the corners go with Jacob on this one, I'm going to throw it to the guy who is setting the screen, which was Tetero McMillan in this case. And he went out there and he stood there like he was kind of acting, like there was no chance he was going to get the ball.
Yeah.
I'm just out here setting a pick. Mm-hmm. I'm Rudy Gobert. I'm not going to get the ball in the offense. And then he did when they got the look that they wanted. So I think that's a big thing.
Well, the way they set it up too was like you could either hit Jacob Cowling in the corner for a 3-pointer, or you can get T-Mac at the basket for an alley-oop. Perfect screen and roll. It's good basketball play.
It was. Hey, can I read you Arizona's starting defensive lineup for last year's Mississippi State game, real quick? Ready?
Sure.
All right. We'll go front to back here. Paris Shand.
I got a feeling you're teasing something.
Yeah, Keon Bars, Jalen Harris, Jerry Roberts, Hunter Eccles, Colby Cage, Jackson Turner, Gunnar Maldonado, Christian Young, Christian Roland Wallace, Isaiah Rutherford.
And so with Maldonado's suspension for the first half, they're not going to have any starters from
Not a single player who started on defense in the Mississippi State game last year will start in this game this year. So Deion Sanders is not the only one who has engineered a dramatic transformation of the roster.
So you've got a dramatic transformation for obviously horrible reasons, but a dramatic transformation of the Mississippi State offense going up against a dramatic transformation of the Arizona defense. I mean, it's exactly what you said, Michael, yesterday in your cat stats is there's no videotape to watch from last year, which is wild because you think of how far out these games are scheduled and back-to-back home-and-home series.
On
and all
one
this
side
stuff.
of the ball is just not applicable.
Neither team can watch tape.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a good subject for a story, Justin, while you're flying to the Southeast.
Is that going to be my advance?
Maybe. I don't know.
How
We'll
different
see.
both these teams are compared to the last opportunity. But, I mean, defensively, we were wondering how is Arizona going to stack up against Mississippi State. Last year, the Bulldogs really dominated time of possession. And when you think of time of possession, what do you normally think of? Man, they ran the hell out of the ball. Man, they were so dominant on the ground. That wasn't the case last year. Will Rogers had almost 50 passes.
But that's
just
the Mike Leach style, though, is you pass
Yes.
to run. I mean, Rich Rod did it here. I mean, there's a lot of that where you're going to throw 50 times. It's the purpose is you're keeping the legs moving and keeping the ball rolling.
Yeah.
So
When I was watching Will Rogers do what he did last year against Arizona, it took me back to Luke Falk at Washington State when Arizona was.
Yeah.
I think it might have been the 2015 season.
16.
16, where I think Arizona maybe had expectations to win that game, and then Luke Falk just came in and just picked apart Arizona. That's what we saw out of Will Rogers last year.
I mean, is there something to the fact, though, that this Arizona team was a touchdown down going into the fourth quarter? I mean, it wasn't like they got blown out. The score looks a lot worse than it was, but they were down by one score going into the fourth quarter last year, despite the time of possession issues.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I think,
their own, situation, especially defensively, that we're talking about.
They could have.
I think that's where
I
think that's where the disparity in depth and talent shows up in the fourth quarter. Mississippi State won the fourth quarter 14-0. Hey, you know who didn't run the hell out of the ball either in that game? Arizona. 22 rushing attempts for 40 net yards. That can't happen again.
Yeah.
That can't happen. And I don't think it will, even if Raymond Polito, the impressive freshman guard, is out again.
I don't remember this. Why did Noah Fafita get into the game last year? I can't remember this.
I think
he threw 8 attempts. Was it?
I think they just took him out. Yeah,
After it was
took him
after
out,
it was a 20 point differential with 5 minutes to go or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just a last drive situation.
Yeah.
If I recall. So yeah, we'll pick this game.
Yeah.
At the very end, we didn't pick it last week, because it was an FCS opponent and all that jazz. We picked 8 games in the Pac-12, and as we predicted, Brett's in first place because it's just that's how it works. The sports editor.
Look, it's very
the sports
clear.
editor is king.
It has to be very clear to anyone who has listened to 2 weeks of this now that Justin and Michael are more prepared than I am to talk about this because it's their job. It's their. I'm an organizer. They are the meat and potatoes of this coverage.
That's the key.
And that's what you told me going in. That's what you told me going in. Is previously Ryan Finley, who was here, he would just show up. Backwards hat on, sunglasses. Okay, guys, let's do this, and he'd blow everyone out of the water. So I'm hoping that juju continues. I'm not certain it will.
It was so weird how it happened. Ryan would be like, "Oh, Ducks, good uniforms. Yeah, I'll pick them to cover." And Lev and I will pick against it. And who was right? It was Ryan.
Good uniform.
Ryan would. Speaking of Deion Sanders, Ryan would just arrive from the football game on the helicopter and just put on his baseball uniform.
Yep. And
hit a triple or steal a base. Whatever. Okay, so the records last week, straight up, Brett and I are tied for first place at 6-2. Justin was 5-3 against the spread, which is all that really counts. Brett 5-3, Justin 3-5, and I was 2-6. Nothing to be proud of, but I think I've learned some lessons from week 1. So are you guys ready to get into it?
Let's do it, man.
Okay. All right. Of course, the talk of college football, the biggest story, maybe in all of sports over the last week or so, Colorado Buffaloes. They're in Big Noon kickoff again, this time at home. One of the coolest and best venues on the West Coast, maybe all of college football, Folsom Field. They are hosting their
That's a Pac-12 guy right there calling Boulder, Colorado the West Coast.
Oh, dude, it's a beautiful setting.
Oh, it is, but it's
and
not
the nation
the
will
West
see it. The nation will. Oh, are you saying calling Colorado the West Coast?
Yeah, that's a Pac-12 thing.
Anything west of the Mississippi, maybe.
Salt Lake City's the West Coast.
It's the Rocky Mountains, baby. That ain't West Coast.
No, I'll take it. I count it. I'm just laughing.
Yeah, all right. So they're playing their storied rival Nebraska. Once again, the game is on Fox. Colorado is favored by only a field goal in this one. I'll go first. Do we believe now, Justin? I think now? to a certain degree we believe. Yeah. Here's my thing about this game. I just don't think Nebraska. I just don't think Nebraska can score enough.
Right.
In this game, I mean, they would really have to just decide, hey, we are going to slow the game down. We're just going to try to run the ball. We're going to keep their offense off the field. I don't know. That's hard to do in modern college football. I don't think 3 points is enough. I'm going to take Colorado to win and cover and get to 2-0. Amazingly enough, more than halfway there if you had them on a season win total of 3.5. Justin.
I'm going with the Buffaloes once again. We're going to get another week of Deion just being absolutely obnoxious about the Buffaloes being great.
But likably obnoxious.
But I love it. I love it. I don't agree with the calling out reporters like, oh, you guys didn't believe us. I saw that bull junkie road. It's like it's not our job to promote Colorado football, right? It's not our job to give you your flowers. I mean, you're 1-11. You went 1-11 last season. You brought in a lot of talented players, sure, but if you want people to give you your flowers, you gotta show it to them. remember, you went 1-11.
It's all part of the show.
Yeah.
It's all part of the show, and it is super duper entertaining.
It is. And I love that Deion's got like his shoes are back.
You know what
his
I love
shoe
about
line.
it? The kids. The players, they're all great. All of them. Not just to watch for football, but like Shadur Sanders is what a sweet kid. I mean, just listening to him talk, like there's such a neat juxtaposition between him and his dad when you hear him articulate what he feels about the game compared to what Deion does. And I love it. I like him too, but I like the guys that they have. I just think they're having a blast and
they're bought in. And I love the fact that they're doing kind of things their own way and putting their own cool spin on it. I love the captain's patches on their jerseys, L for leaders and D for dogs. I love that. I think that's so cool. I think it's going to come back and kind of bite them in the keister when they lose a game and they have a giant L on their jersey. I think about all the memes that can come out of that. But Nebraska is going to Nebraska. They are the Chargers of college football. They have gone 2-14 in one-score games since the 2021 season. 2-14 in one-score games. This is going to be a close one, I feel like. I think Nebraska is going to hang tough, but I got the Buffaloes winning by a tutty.
I got Colorado 10-point game. It's going to be tighter than Colorado wants to believe, but they're going to win and cover.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the one danger, of course, is Colorado's defense wasn't very good in that case. Great as their offense was, they also gave up over 500 yards, so that'll be an interesting matchup to watch. We all have Colorado in that one. That's no surprise. Okay, so also in that 9 a.m. MST/PT window, we've got Utah traveling to Baylor, a future Big 12 matchup. Justin's over there shaking his head for reasons.
I've learned my lesson.
Oh, yeah, we'll see. This is an interesting one. Baylor lost last week to Texas State.
The Bobcats, yeah.
At home?
Mm-hmm.
Ouch.
I prefer to call them the armadillos, but that's okay.
Unnecessary roughness? Yeah.
Justin asked me on his show a couple weeks ago, what's your favorite football movie? I'm like, unnecessary roughness. Out of the blue, I don't know why. That was the first thing in my head, but that's a lost opportunity, by the way.
It doesn't matter who's playing quarterback. You could throw Cam Rising. You could throw Bryson Barnes. Nate Johnson, right? There was their third-string guy. It don't matter, man. Utah is loaded from top to bottom. I think Baylor, they will bounce back. I think they will play it tough. But I'm going to go with
8 points.
It's 8 points. I'm going to go with the Utes winning, but Baylor covering. By the way, David Aranda, their head coach, looks like my co-host, Ollie Farhang. Like a spitting image of him. But anyways.
I've heard this. You know, sometimes when Scott Van Pelt throws out his winners each week, he'll just sort of say, like, there's no logical reason behind this whatsoever. I'm just taking the dog. I'm taking the dog to cover, just like Justin. I'm taking Baylor. It makes no sense whatsoever that, you know, a team that lost at home to Texas State would be able to hang with a top 15 caliber program in Utah with their quarterback, you know, maybe coming back for this game. But there could be a little bit of a letdown factor for Utah. I mean, everyone was so hyped up for that opener last week. So you have to keep that in mind. And the other thing with me, you're going to hear me talk about this a lot over the course of the season, but I look at yards gained often more so than what the final score says. And Utah actually got outgained by Florida in that game. Didn't maybe feel like it, but they got outgained by 123 yards. And Baylor actually outgained Texas State by over 100 yards. So yeah, always keep that in the back of your mind. I got Utah to win, Baylor to cover.
Yeah, Utah to win, Utah to cover. I just think is it still at 7.5?
8. We're going with 8. Yeah.
In that 7.5, 8 range, you know, do I really think Baylor is going to be in it with a chance to score to tie, you know, late in the game, whether they have the ball or could take it back? No, I don't.
Okay.
So to me, it's Utah win and cover, but it won't be just like Colorado, Nebraska. I don't think it's going to be a 20-point blowout. I think it's going to be within the 10-point range.
All right. Elsewhere in the state of Texas, we have Oregon visiting Texas Tech. The Ducks are favored in this game by 6.5 points. Texas Tech was the victim of one of the bigger upsets of week 1. They went up to Wyoming and were ahead early, and they ended up losing in, I think, double overtime against that. You know, always difficult opponent in Wyoming. They play hard. They play well. They're overcoming a lot of obstacles up there with the transfer portal, and so forth. Oregon absolutely blasted Portland State last week. I think it was 81-7 was the final score. I mean, they probably could have scored 100 if they really wanted to. I'm going to take Texas Tech to win outright in this game. Once again, it doesn't make a lot of sense on paper, but this just feels like a trap game to me for Oregon. Like, they're feeling really good about themselves. Probably feel like they can just go into Texas Tech and roll over them. That'll be a really good and lively crowd. I'm going to take the Red Raiders. Win and cover.
You said Tyler Shuck is quarterbacking?
Yeah.
So revenge game for him.
Yep.
At home in Lubbock. I like the quarterback getting it done against his former team. Give me the Texas Tech Red Raiders to pull off the upset and beat the Oregon Ducks.
Gonna make it 3 for 3, Brett. No.
He's not. We're going chalk. Oregon win, Oregon cover.
This is why
no debate.
Okay.
Zero.
This is why Brett
not even a conversation. Good uniforms.
This is why Brett.
Shout out to Ryan Finley.
This is why Brett is the boss. Okay. All right. So
logic just kind of floats in front of my.
All right. Snapdragon Stadium, Justin. We've been there and done that. Be careful of the sunburn factor, even if you're in the press box, reflecting off of the white counter in front of you. This is a real thing that happened to us last year. But that was a 12:30 kickoff. This, San Diego State against UCLA, is a 4:30 kickoff. And the point spread currently is at 14. The Bruins are favored. They didn't look that great against Coastal Carolina. They were favored by 14.5 against the Chanticleers, and they ended up winning by 14. So that was a loss for me and Justin, and it was a win for Brett. We'll start with you on this one, Justin. Some teams that we're really familiar with. Bruins going on the road, favored by 2 touchdowns against the Aztecs. Who you got?
Even though they kind of looked very mild against Coastal Carolina, they still got to the quarterback. They sacked Grayson McCall 4 times in that game on Saturday. So I think pass rush, stuff like that travels, even if it's just a couple hours down south in San Diego. So I'm going to go with UCLA to go down to San Diego. What was that spread again? You said
14.
14. I'm going to go with UCLA to win and cover. I'm going with the Bruins to win by 17 points, maybe even 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, again, this doesn't make sense at all based on the results so far. San Diego State has had 2 home games. They played against Ohio, and Ohio lost their quarterback early in the game. San Diego State won by only 7.
Yeah.
They played at home against Idaho State, and they only won by 8. So it sort of stands to reason that the Big Ten bound UCLA would come down there and take care of business. But I'm going to take San Diego State to beat the spread, keep it kind of a low scoring game. But UCLA will win, something like 27-17. So I'm going to take UCLA to win, but San Diego State to cover. Brett?
I'm with Lev exactly. UCLA to win, San Diego State to cover. Good helmets. No, I agree with just about every point on San Diego State. I don't think they've done anything to show me that they can win one of these games, but I think UCLA came out one of the flattest performances, if not the flattest performance in the entire Pac-12 last week. So to get another 14-point bump, I just don't buy that they even deserve that kind of number at this point.
Yeah, I think I saw that they had the lowest attendance by percentage of capacity of any West Coast home venue last week. I mean, part of that, of course, is the Rose Bowl is ridiculously big and too big.
I've talked about it on this show. If you take the Big 12 and the Pac-12, Big 10 will leave out, even though that's where UCLA and USC are going. Big 12 and the Pac-12, Arizona's home and future home. 3 worst stadiums in college football for regular season games in no particular order is Kansas, Arizona, and UCLA, which is ironic because the Rose Bowl is amazing for a bowl setting, but it's terrible. If I'm UCLA, I am cutting a deal with the devil and going to Carson and doing what the Chargers did. As soon as I go even though it's in USC territory, and go play there and get people to show up, and then cut a deal with SC to do what the Cotton Bowl does for Texas, Oklahoma, and play our game there and the bowl game, and just got to get out of that building.
Yeah, they just don't have a good home field situation because they're off campus no matter what you do.
It would be a better home field. I recognize the Coliseum is, but it would be a better home field for USC because, excuse me, the 110 freeway, and I think it's the Blue Line, the Metro Blue Line in LA, can take you straight there from downtown LA. You can't get there from Westwood without like crazy street driving and 17 different freeway interchanges, even though it's only like 12 miles. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It is hard to get to the Rose Bowl. And when your stadium's off campus, that's a big challenge.
Also, isn't it like a very exclusive neighborhood around the Rose Bowl?
By Pasadena?
Too?
Oh, yeah.
So, like, parking is an absolute nightmare. You tailgate on a golf course. Right?
And it's also just too big.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the capacity? 90,000?
That's why I'm saying,
80,000?
Carson, it would take people just as long to get there, but it's 25,000 people, and it's semi-new, and we know that it was, like, ready for NFL teams as recently as 3 years ago with the Chargers. So to me, there are stadiums in LA that could work better for UCLA.
Yeah, weren't some of the Florida guys? Wasn't there a meme or something about Florida guys like saying how small the venue was, Rice Eccles, compared to like the SEC?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, they lost. Handily. Second of all, like sometimes a smaller venue, if it's packed,
tighter, louder,
like works to your advantage.
By the way, I put Arizona in that mix, and it's only just because the old gray lady, Lev and I got to sit down with Dave Hickey and talk about this at length. So go to Tucson.com/Wildcats and find those stories. But the reality is, the only reason I say that is they could make one upgrade while Dave Hickey builds his grand plan over the next 10 years, and that is chairbacks. 5,000 fewer seats in the building, put chairbacks across the building. You don't do anything else. You don't upgrade the bathrooms. You don't do anything else, but just put chairbacks.
We noticed behind the south end zone, it looked like they had put chairs on top of the benches.
Interesting.
So
because before it was the north end zone, it was obviously that second deck that was the old like club area, which is still there, but it kind of taken over by the north end zone. And then it was section 1, which was families and recruits. And it's sort of
those are
into the student section.
Those were actual seats. These look like something that had been placed atop the benches.
They have those. You can pay and rent for them. You can pay and rent them. And anyone who's a season ticket holder who doesn't rent those is crazy. I don't care if it adds a couple $100 to your season ticket. Those bleachers are going to take years off your back stability.
So speaking of like small, lively venues, we have Washington State hosting Wisconsin. At Martin Stadium up there in Pullman.
Gesa Field.
Gesa Field, at Martin Stadium. So last year, Washington State went to Madison and won. Okay, Washington State blew out Colorado State on the road last week. Wisconsin defeated Buffalo at home. I mean, it was fairly one-sided, but not like a massive blowout. And yet, despite all of that, Washington State is getting 6 points in this game. They are home dogs. I had a major double take on this one. I'm like, am I seeing this right? Yeah. Washington State is the underdog at home against Wisconsin. This is my 5-star lock of the week, whatever you want to call it. I'm taking the Cougs to win this game outright. I think they're honoring Mike Leach during this game. They're just pissed off at the world right now because of what happened with conference realignment. Further disrespect against the Cougars with this point spread. I'm taking Wazoo.
How could you disrespect the Pac-2 like that, man? Don't you ever disrespect the Pac-2? This is going to be a tough game. I really think that it's going to be a close one, but I'm going with the Cougars to win and beat the Badgers. I mean, I agree with you, Lev. I think that Washington State isn't getting a lot of love this year. I know that last week I said that not having Eric Morris on staff, I think, is really going to hurt their system, and then they go out and put up a 50-burger on Colorado State. So it looks like Washington State hasn't missed a beat from a year ago. And so I got the Cougars going out and beating what T-Pain calls Wisconsin. Brett.
What are the rules here of these picks? Like, do I actually have to pick what I think, or am I allowed to just go against you guys because I'm hoping to flip the table?
You can do whatever you want.
I agree with both of you, but I don't want to go chalk.
We all took Colorado.
Yeah,
it's true. Okay, yeah, I think Washington State. I think dropping 50. I think Colorado State's not any good, but I think dropping 50 on Colorado State proved that they have the offensive movement necessary still at Washington State to do damage, and I don't think Wisconsin's great. I think they're good. I don't think they're great, and I think the Pac-2 disrespect is going to go a long way for both Washington State and Oregon State this year. They're not both going to go 12-0, but you're going to get 20-plus wins between the two of them, in my opinion.
Yeah, we're not picking Oregon State.
Also, by the way, you
ahead,
mentioned Mike Leach, and if you take this game and you take the Arizona-Mississippi State game and you take Oregon-Texas Tech, a lot of interconnected things because of Mike Leach's time in the Pac-12. This is kind of his weekend in college football in a lot of ways. He played Arizona many times when he was at Washington State, probably played Oregon many times, obviously being at Washington State, being at Mississippi State, like all the interconnections. This is kind of the weekend college football should be celebrating Mike Leach, in my opinion.
And you mentioned him somewhat being connected to Arizona vacancies in the past, right?
A few times, yeah. I mean, it was talked about quite a few times.
Yeah.
All right, we're not picking Oregon State this week because they are hosting UC Davis. We are picking the matchup, again, future Big 12 matchup between Oklahoma State and Arizona State. This one is in Tempe. And the Cowboys, a lot of people thought the Cowboys are kind of down this year. You know, they're kind of had more kind of a net losses in the portal compared to a lot of other schools, of their caliber. They won in week 1 over Central Arkansas, 27-13, kind of a meh result. Arizona State had, one of the closest matchups of anyone in week 1 in a weather delayed game. They beat Southern Utah only 24-21 in that game. And is it fair to wonder if is ASU the worst team in a very good Pac-12 this year? Maybe. Anyway, the Sun Devils are getting 3 points. They're home dogs in this game against the Cowboys. Justin, we'll start with you.
Not encouraged by Oklahoma State's game against Central Arkansas to start the season, only beating them by a couple of touchdowns. But ASU, I kind of get the vibe that they're not really fighting for anything. Kenny Dillingham is a guy who really cares and is really invested into the program. But I feel like ever since the news came out of their self-imposed postseason ban, like the little bit of air that they've had under Kenny Dillingham just kind of left the program. I didn't really see any fight from ASU against Southern Utah, albeit there was a haboob delay that can really take some life out of you.
That was a serious storm, by the way. That
right.
was wild.
What did I mention the joke last week of Pedro Gomez calling it baboon? The late great Pedro Gomez.
Do you think was that just an autocorrect?
No, it was autocorrect. Yeah, he was at a D-backs game.
I've seen it. Yeah,
and then just was like, there's a baboon has taken over Arizona. And from that point on, they leaned into it. They had the rally baboon there for a little bit, but take away the haboob. I didn't see much fight from ASU. I think this is the season where they're just kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Guys are kind of checked out. I'm not buying the Sun Devils. It's going to be 107 at kickoff, which I think is the hottest game
That's disputed already
on record. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. It's going to be really hot. But
it will be hot.
It will be hot.
Yeah.
I heard it's going to be the hottest temperature since 2013. But regardless of what time of day it is, at this point in Tempe, any home game is really hot. I remember a few years ago going to their game against Michigan State. It was like one of the biggest wins of the Herm Edwards era. Even at evening kickoff time, I was sweating the entire game. With that being said, I got Oklahoma State coming in, taking care of business, and beating the Sun Devils.
It's not a big enough line to make me worry about the spread on this. So I think it's Oklahoma State, and it's going to be a field goal or more. But it's interesting. I was coming into this thinking, like, did Kenny Dillingham has played off that he didn't know about any of this coming. It sure seems that way from everything he said and the way he said it about the self-imposed bowl ban and stuff. But the decision the week before to put Jaden Rashada in at quarterback, it's a very interesting dynamic because if Rashada plays well this season in a situation like they're in, transfer portal opens everything up. I don't know. It's just fascinating to me how the inner workings of decisions like that could come to play out in the long run. On the other hand, I'm rooting for Oklahoma State in this one. Not rooting, but
for the sake of your picks.
For the sake of my picks, I think Oklahoma State has a. They were bad this past week. I watched a little bit of that game against Central Arkansas, and they were just not good. They might have a quarterback controversy, a lot of things, but I think the weight on ASU's shoulders is too strong that they're going to struggle until they get into a sort of one of those nothing to lose Pac-12 games where they can really damage someone's season, and then they're going to do it. It's going to be SC, or I don't know their schedule off the top of my head, but it's going to be somebody. If Arizona comes in at 5-6, like it's going to be
man.
someone, and I think ASU is going to pull that off a couple times this year, like Arizona has done many times in the Mike Stoops era and beyond, and Jed Fish era now. But I think it's Oklahoma State, but it's going to be tighter than it should be, probably, all things considered.
Neither team looked really good in week 1, and I was gonna go with you guys on this one, but I changed my mind here at the last minute. I think I'm going to go with ASU. There was a lot of weird distractions going into that game last week. I mean, they had the bomb dropped on them about the bowl game situation. They had the 2+ hour weather delay. So, hey, we've had more than a week to reset, recalibrate. Sun Devils can get their minds right. Again, a little bit of disrespect here, getting points at home. So I'm going to take the Sun Devils.
There's another piece to this that isn't necessarily football related, but it is, and that's the fact that a lot of the Pac-12, Big 12 conversation, it's interesting here in Tucson how a lot of the conversation has been driven that this can be palatable because of basketball primarily, but, there's less of an issue in Tucson. That's another thing happening up there, by the way. Whether it's parts of the local media, fan base, people aren't totally happy with how Michael Crow and Ray Anderson, let alone the bowl ban, handled the Pac-12, Big 12 thing, which is very different from Tucson. So, I mean, that's weighing too up there. There's just a lot of stuff, to your point, that is just sort of hanging over the centerpiece of their athletic department, which is football. Yeah. And so I think, to add to that point you're making, Michael, it's just a lot. They're just sort of hung there.
Yeah, does that help them? Does it hurt them? I mean, that's the question. Okay, we're skipping the Stanford USC game this week. Trojans are favored by 29 points. There have been instances in the past where Stanford upset USC with a similar point spread, but we don't think that's going to happen this week.
Caleb Williams is going to go out, throw 6 touchdowns, and really improve his stock to come back and play in the UA-MSU.
His NIL capabilities. What's your deal? Wasn't that Harbaugh?
Yeah.
What's your deal?
Okay, but we are going to pick Cal and Auburn. Auburn is going out to the West Coast. They are playing in Berkeley. This is a 7:30 p.m. game. Feels like definite Pac-12 after dark possibilities here. Enjoy it while you can. Auburn from the SEC, they didn't play that great in week 1. They played UMass. So what I mean to say is the expectations for Auburn, the expectations for Auburn coming into the season, pretty low, relatively speaking, for Auburn. First-year coach in Hugh Freeze. Very difficult division in which they play. No one really expecting a lot out of them. Not surprising that they wiped out UMass. UMass was kind of up for a letdown, I think. They, as I mentioned in the column I wrote about them, maybe the most difficult job in America, being the head coach of independent UMass, where they are, who they play, all of those things. So they're going up against the Cal team that also put up over 50 points in week 1, which is something we haven't seen from Cal very often, except the random game against Arizona last year, I think, when they got up to 49. So Auburn, big SEC traditional powerhouse, going to Berkeley, giving 6.5 points to the Golden Bears. Justin, we will start with you.
If Auburn alumnus Bo Jackson is watching this game, he better get ready, because he's about to see the Tecmo Bowl version of himself in Jaden Ott from Cal. This dude is a stud. I mean, he was a stud last year as a freshman. Last week against North Texas, we saw him have 20 carries, 178 yards, and 2 touchdowns. This guy is one of the best running backs, not only in the Pac-12, but I think just in college football in general. I think Jaden Ott's a really, really good talent. And so I'm going to go Jaden Ott having another impressive performance. I got Cal covering, but Auburn winning on the road.
Brett.
I got Auburn straight up. It's funny you mentioned UMass as the toughest job in college football. I actually think it's Auburn. I think as good as their facilities are, as good as their dollars to cents are, as good as their fan base is, they were playing for national titles in the last 20 years. Won. And didn't they share another, or were they close back in the Tuberville era again with USC and some of the other teams? But anyway, and nobody cares compared to Alabama. Just their fan base does, but that's it. So, but Hugh Freeze is the guy who is perfect for that place, because he doesn't care what anybody thinks about anything about him. So I think it's Auburn straight up.
Yeah, I've got Auburn winning and covering as well. Cal was very impressive.
Sorry, straight up meaning winning and covering.
Yeah. Got you. Yep, I got you. Cal was very impressive last week. Jaden Ott ran for 188 yards in that game. They used 2 quarterbacks. I think the starter got injured, and Ben Finley, transfer, came in and played really well. So there's a little bit of uncertainty at that position for them. But to me, the biggest factor here is even though Auburn is flying all the way across the country, there's going to be no home field advantage for Cal. I bet you there will be more Auburn fans in the building than there will be Cal fans. So I think that just take that out of the equation completely, whatever that's worth. That 3 points, I don't think it's going to matter. So I think Auburn goes in there and wins that game, covers the 6.5. All right. Now, the grand finale, we have Arizona at Mississippi State. This game is at 4:30 p.m. Arizona time. It's on SEC Network. This point spread has been all over the map.
Yeah.
Brett, this is wild. That point spread opened at 18.5. And then it went all the way down to 8.5. But you never, unless there's some, quarterback injury situation, you never see that with point spreads. And now it's settled in. We're going to go with 10 as the latest line here. Arizona, a double-digit dog heading down to SEC country. I mean, the question for me is, are they ready for this? This is a huge step up in competition. The environment is going to be difficult. Probably going to be missing a couple starters. Traden Stukes, we believe that he got a concussion last week, a reference to the protocol for him, one of their key defenders. Still probably going to be without, projected starting lineman Raymond Polito, who's a very high upside freshman for them. I don't think they're quite ready to win a game like this, but can they hang around? Can they make it interesting? Can they lose by less than 10 points? I think they can. So I think that Arizona will make Mississippi State sweat. I think they're going to make them work for this. They're going to show a lot of stuff they didn't show last week. Mississippi State's going to edge them in the end, but Arizona is going to cover the 10.
Jayden de Laura is a much different quarterback this time around than he was last year against Mississippi State. He can run more. He's just a more polished quarterback in Jed Fish's system.
More comfortable.
And I think that, we're going to see a different version of Jayden de Laura. Now, can you not play hero ball? It's a big game. Jayden de Laura knows that. You're on the road against an SEC opponent. We saw last year Jayden de Laura play hero ball, scrambling all over like a madman, trying to create something. I mean, I watched Jayden de Laura play football last year, and I thought I was holding a PlayStation controller. The way he played and ran around the pocket, it's the way I play Madden in NCAA football. If Jayden can protect the football, not turn it over, and if Arizona can execute in what they call the red area, meaning every time they get inside the 20-yard line, can you turn those drives into touchdowns? If they can do that, and if the defensive backs and linebackers, let's say Will Rogers does throw a lot more this time around as opposed to last week when they had almost 300 rushing yards. Can these guys make the tackles? Tackling was a big issue for Arizona last year, especially early on in the season. Can these safeties, can Jacob Manu, who didn't have a role in last year's game, now he does. He's a superstar for Arizona's defense, has a knack for the ball even though he's so undersized. There's a lot more talent on the defensive side of the ball. Guys who didn't make an impact early on in the season last year, they made impacts in the second half. So with a new look on defense, with the offense being more settled in, I know it's going to be on the road, and the Cowbells are going to be very rowdy. I think that we're going to see Arizona go in. I got the Wildcats pulling off the win. I got them getting the upset. Wow. I got Arizona. It's going to be a squeaker of a game, man. It's going to be so tough. And I think this is going to be the game where they throw the kitchen sink at them. They didn't throw it to Tanner McLaughlin last week. I think T-Mac is a much different receiver than he was a year ago. So all these factors that I'm thinking about, I think it spells for Arizona to go in and have a marquee win in the last year of them being a Pac-12 member, going on the road and beating an SEC opponent.
He didn't even really throw it to Cowling last week either.
No. Barely.
Barely 3 catches for him.
So that's what I'm saying. I think they really did a good job of
winning by a lot without doing a lot.
Keeping it basic, keeping it vanilla. And then, this is the game where you go out, you set the tone, and if you beat Mississippi State, obviously you like your chances against UTEP the following week and on the road against Stanford. Now we're looking at Arizona setting themselves up for the meat grinder part of their schedule with a really good record.
Also receiving bonus time.
That
not this week. If they get to 4-0, I'm saying.
Well, I mean, I think if they beat Mississippi State on the road this week, I think they'll get a few votes.
Yeah, that's fair.
Arizona would?
Yeah, for AP Top 25.
Well, I don't know. I guess I have some control over that, don't I? Brett, what is your pick in the big game here?
Mississippi State winning and covering, but I do think it's close. I think Arizona's going to be within a touchdown last few minutes of the game, and Mississippi State's going to ice it. So they're going to win because of the spread, but
bad beat situation maybe if you got
not that bad of a beat. I mean, I think Mississippi State's going to have the ball up by 3 or 7. Arizona's going to be hoping for a turnover and just not get it, and Mississippi State's going to score a touchdown. Like, that's my belief.
Yeah. I'm not buying the whole, they're so run heavy. They're all focused on it. Like, Jaquavius Marks is a really good running back, but I think against Southeast Louisiana, you're supposed to go out there and put up these kind of numbers.
So is Arizona against NAU.
Yeah, true. But again, we're not really talking about, the identity of Arizona's offense changing, you know what I mean? So.
And the defense did its part. So
yeah. And if the defense, heck, we're talking about them. If they could stop the run, if Jaquavius Marks, if he, goes out there and is effective, how can the defensive linemen, how can the interior guys plug up the gaps and allow Manu, Daniel Haimuli, and others to make the plays? So, all right, that'll do it for this episode of the Wildcast. Please subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast podcast wherever you get your podcast. Arizona versus Mississippi State kickoff is set for 4:30 p.m., and you can watch it on the SEC network, and you can follow all of our coverage on Tucson.com and the Wildcaster app.